Hey, what's up, everybody? Steve Schwartz here from LSAT Unplugged. Today, I wanted to go live again and answer your questions, do some Q&A. I know we've got the October LSAT coming up. We've got the November LSAT coming up. A lot of folks are reaching out with questions and struggles, and I want to help out as many folks as I can to give you guidance on your LSAT journey. So I'm all opening the floor to Q&A, anything at all, LSAT and law school admissions. You can call in to talk to me live at unpluggedprep.com/live. If you can't make it now or you want to have a longer, more in-depth private conversation, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. Now, I was speaking with a student earlier today who told me that she was at a 134 and aiming for a 150. And I was kind of surprised because a 150 isn't a common goal score or target score I typically hear from students. The median or average LSAT score across the board is a 151. And so 150 actually puts you below average. And in my view, a 150 is not getting you into any law school worth attending, certainly not with scholarship money. And so when I asked her why she wanted a 150, she told me that she wanted to go to the University of Florida, UF Law, Levin College of Law. And so I looked up their LSAT median, and she had told me that she thought a 150 would be enough. Turns out that UF Law's LSAT median is a 169. And so a 150 is not even in the same ballpark, not anywhere close to the median. And so I asked her, well, what's your undergraduate GPA? Because your law school admissions chances are a combination or a function of your LSAT score combined with your undergraduate GPA. Law schools combine these two numbers into a formula called an admissions index, which determines your chances essentially. So this student told me, I'm not going to name names here, I don't want to embarrass her or shame her, but I'm anonymizing her personal situation. Her undergraduate GPA was a 3.4, ballpark, give or take. Now, UF Law's LSAT median is a 169, and their GPA median is a 391. And so if you are below the GPA median, you ideally want to be at or above the LSAT median to maximize your odds of acceptance. And if you're below the GPA median, significantly in her case, 391 is their median, she's at a 3.4. So she's 0.5 below on the GPA, which is pretty significant. That means you want to be above the LSAT median to counteract the relatively lower GPA. This puts you in the position of being a so-called splitter applicant, high LSAT, low GPA. Very common situation, not at all, nothing to be concerned about. You just got to balance it out by getting a higher LSAT. And so a 150 is not anywhere close enough to getting what you want to get. And so this student should have been aiming for at least a 175 ideally. And so 150, not even close. The point here being, do the research. Don't assume that a 150 or any given score is going to get you into where you want to be. And ideally, you want to be applying with an LSAT score at or above the medians, no matter what. But 150 is not going to do it. And so do the research. You can look up the LSAT and GPA medians for any given law school. If you just Google a given law school's name with LSAT, GPA, ABA 509, you're going to see all the details around what got folks in last year. But don't assume that what got you in last year is going to get you in this year, because the LSAT medians and the GPA medians are constantly rising. There's LSAT score inflation. There's GPA inflation as well. And so you want to ideally be both above the LSAT median and the GPA median. And if you're at a 134 and you need to hit 174, don't try to do it overnight. Don't try to knock out the LSAT in 3 weeks before October, for example, or even 6-7 weeks before November. You want to allow yourself the time to achieve your fullest potential. And a 40-point increase doesn't happen overnight. I mean, we've seen students improve 20, 25, 30 points and beyond, but those are outliers. Those results are not typical. Yours may vary. I can't promise or guarantee you any particular score increase, but I can say that your LSAT improvement will ultimately be a function of putting in the work and also studying the right way. Now, I'm opening the floor to any and all questions, LSAT and law school admissions. Do me a favor, drop in the chat when you're planning on taking the LSAT, if you have a general sense of when you might take it, where you're currently scoring, if you've taken a practice test so far, and what your goal score is. So any and all of that information you could share would really be helpful in allowing me to better tailor this conversation to your needs, meeting you where you're at, and of course, helping you achieve your LSAT and law school goals. If you're on YouTube, you can drop a comment. If you're on Instagram, you can drop a comment. If you're on LinkedIn, I don't think I'll be able to see the comments till later, just due to the nature of how these live streams tend to function. But do me a favor, just drop in the chat at the very least when you're taking the LSAT and what your goal is, and I can try to give you some guidance around all of that. So just drop a comment leaving those details. Now, I got a question here from Sarah. She says she's currently at a 162, looking to target 170, about 3 months till the LSAT. So I guess you're taking it in January, right? I've been drilling logical reasoning every day, but I plateaued at 162. How do I push past this plateau and actually see improvement before my January test? So you've been drilling logical reasoning every day and you're stuck at 162. So my first thought is, what about reading comprehension? And what about doing work beyond drilling? So is logical reasoning where you need to focus specifically? Are you neglecting reading comprehension and not giving it the time and effort that it deserves? I mean, reading comprehension is a third of the test, right? And if you're at a 162, there's probably room to improve in all areas. Now, there may be some particular weak areas in logical reasoning, certain question types, but when you're in the 160s, you probably have a general sense or a general foundation with regard to the majority of question types in logical reasoning, say strengthen, weaken, flaw, necessary assumption, sufficient assumption, and so on. And so if you're getting questions wrong, it's probably not because of the LR type. And I wonder if maybe you've got to adjust your study plan to devote more attention to reading comprehension and also potentially devote more attention to doing timed work. When a student plateaus, it means that they've hit some sort of constraint or run into some sort of wall. And so you got to change the variables to change the equation, right? We got to change the inputs to generate different outputs. And so if you've been drilling, maybe you've been neglecting doing individual timed sections to work on your pacing or doing full-length exams to work on your endurance. Maybe you just haven't had enough exposure or enough practice to the timed setting or reading comprehension as well. Now, of course, this is the exact kind of plateau that we dive into during our live one-on-one tutoring sessions, because the solution at this point usually isn't more drills. It's about changing your LSAT study plan and changing the nature of your review process. We use a framework called the Socratic review method, and this is usually where the breakthroughs happen. And so, Sarah, if you want to have a more in-depth or more personal conversation about this, you can check out the link that I'm showing on the screen here, unpluggedprep.com/start. You can book a free call with me, and I'll be happy to walk you through the details in a more in-depth and longer conversation to go deep into the exact areas that you're struggling with. You can access this through the link in my bio. For those of you watching on Instagram, you can access it through the description below this video on YouTube. Thanks for your great question here. Now, I've got Nick asking, currently scoring 159, past 3 prep tests, taking the November LSAT. Goal is to get a 164. Thanks for any advice. And so the increase that you're looking for, 5 points from 159 to 164, is really quite reasonable. I can't see why you couldn't improve 5 points with roughly 6-7 weeks. You could probably even get there by October if you had been taking the October LSAT. And so I'm guessing that 159 is a pretty consistent average, that you're not fluctuating too wildly over the course of those 3 exams. I'm curious, Nick, if you could share more. Are there certain particular weak areas or points of struggle that you're facing? Because there are lots of different roads to get a 5-point increase, but it's going to vary from individual to individual. And so, Nick, if you don't mind sharing, I mean, is there a certain question type or a certain section that you really don't like, that you find yourself struggling with? And I can give you some more direct advice around that. And by the way, Nick, if you want to call in, you could join me live right now at unpluggedprep.com/live, and we could actually talk through this for a couple of minutes if you'd like. But if you prefer to just drop a comment with some more details, I could give you more tailored advice. Usually what I find is that to get a 5-point increase, if that's all you're looking for, there's probably some low-hanging fruit. If we're looking at logical reasoning, for example, I would start with the 3 most common types of logical reasoning questions, since those are going to be highest leverage for you to start with. I'm talking here about necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. I wouldn't want you to spend your time on less common types like parallel reasoning or evaluate the argument, because you're not going to get nearly as much bang for your buck focusing on those, since they just aren't as common. The most frequent areas of struggle are going to be more impactful for you to spend your time on. Then, if you're struggling with reading comprehension, I would look at your note taking, your highlighting, because any adjustments we make there in reading comprehension are going to cut across the entire reading comprehension section that could potentially impact 27, 28 questions. And so just doing one of those two things, focusing on either the most common types of logical reasoning questions or your overall reading comp approach, that alone could be enough to get you the 5-point increase that you're looking for. I see you dropped a follow-up comment here saying, I consistently do bad on the last passage in logical reasoning. I don't know why that's the case. I also struggle heavily on harder role principle questions. Would join the call, but I'm listening from my cubicle. Well, I appreciate that you're calling in from work. I understand that you can't call in live. No worries. Maybe you could book a call with me later and we could discuss this more in depth. Unpluggedprep.com/start for a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. But to your point here now, since we got the time, I mean, you mentioned you're struggling with the last passage. I'm guessing you mean argument or question in logical reasoning. And you said you don't know why that's the case. I mean, I would hazard a guess that maybe the reason you're having trouble with the hardest one is just because it's the end of the section. Maybe you're fatigued, maybe you're tired. In logical reasoning, they're in a general order of difficulty, so the later questions are going to be harder on average. And so if you were struggling with the last question in logical reasoning, my guess would be that it's because you're pressed for time, combined with the fact that it's the hardest question. And so those two factors, when combined, really compound or to make a perfect storm or disaster, frankly. And so I would recommend you speed up on the easier ones so that you have more time for the tougher questions later in the section that truly need it. And with a level 5 or the 5 out of 5, meaning the hardest type of question in logical reasoning, it's going to have more tricks and traps contained within it. And so I would recommend that you, during your review process, using a framework like the Socratic review method, you dig a bit deeper into what exactly are the tricks and traps that you are most prone to falling for, so that you can avoid making those same mistakes again, so that you can gain the full insight out of your review process to dig down into exactly what you're most typically going to struggle with. Now, I see you left a follow-up comment that it's actually the last passage in reading comprehension that you struggle with. And so a lot of what I actually said would still apply, though. I mean, if you're pressed for time at the end of a section, things are going to go more poorly. You have an average of 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage, and you've got 4 passages or passage sets, at least in reading comprehension. They're not all going to be of equal difficulty. The last passage is usually not the easiest. The first passage is usually not the hardest. They tend to get more difficult, broadly speaking, as the section goes on. And so I would say, again, similar, maybe you want to speed up on the easier passages earlier in the section. And I'm curious if you could share, Nick, I mean, how long are you spending on average per passage for the ones that you do attempt? So are you, for example, spending more than 8:45 on the first 3 passages on average? So let's say if you were spending 11 or 12 minutes on the first 3 each, that would mean that you only had 2 minutes left. If you say 3 passages, 11 minutes, each 33 minutes, out of 35, you've got 2 minutes left for the last passage. I'm not saying it's necessarily that bad, but that's probably directionally the case. And so you're struggling because you're out of time. Would that be a fair assumption to say, Nick? Do you think that's probably the case? If it is, we've got to look at how to get you to speed up on the earlier ones. And so I generally recommend spending roughly 2.5, 3 minutes on your initial read of the passage. You're saying, yes, absolutely. Okay, so you're spending roughly 2.5, 3 minutes, ideally, on the read of the passage, meaning that's where you're actually looking at the text of the 450 words of the passage. You're making any notes, you're maybe highlighting or underlining, and then you're spending roughly six minutes on average solving the questions. And so if you spend more than 3 minutes on your initial read, you're not going to have enough time to solve the associated questions. Even with 3 minutes on your read and 6 minutes for the questions, you're already at less than 1 minute per passage per question. You can't really afford to go that much more below it, right? If you're spending 30 seconds on a given question alone, that's not really reasonable, right? I mean, when I run through a reading comprehension section. I'm looking to allocate my time strategically where I spend only 2.5 minutes reading the passage. I want to pull out the main idea, primary purpose, tone of the passage. I would have a general sense of what the best title of the passage would be. I'd have a general sense of the flow. That's it. Details, evidence, supporting examples. I'm not going to overly focus on those. I'll go back to find them when I need to help me solve a particular question. I'll return back to the text, but I'm not going to want to attempt it in the moment to get a full in-depth comprehensive understanding, because it's essentially a triage situation, meaning I'm looking to go fast and just get the big picture. Because I just can't afford to be a perfectionist. There's not enough time. And you can't absorb all the arbitrary facts in your head at once. The LSAT in general really pushes beyond the limits of your typical working memory. So don't overload your brain. Just get the big picture, zoom out, knock out the global questions that are all about main idea, primary purpose, and such. And then for the detail-oriented questions, you go back, find the specific line supporting that choice, and then you just got to move on. Also, consider other certain topics you like more than others. And so you've got 4 different categories of topics in reading comprehension. You have natural science, social science, humanities, and law. And whichever one of those you dislike the most, I would recommend, of course, doing more of those passages on those topics so that you can familiarize yourself with them. You can, what's the word? I guess I want to say you want to desensitize yourself to the fear or anxiety or distaste for those particular topics, because inevitably those same 4 categories will show up on every exam. Natural science, social science, humanities, and law. Within natural science, it could be biology or chemistry or physics or ecology. It's a grab bag, but you've got at this point roughly 400 or so released reading comprehension passages available to you. I don't think you need to go beyond them to, say, read Scientific American or The Economist if you're taking the LSAT less than a year from now. And you mentioned you're taking it in November. So take some time to look at a handful of passages on topics you don't like and try to get more comfortable, more familiar with them so that when it comes up inevitably on test day, you'll be well equipped to handle it. And thanks all for joining, by the way. This is an open Q&A. Feel free to drop questions in the chat or the comments, whether you're on Instagram or YouTube or anywhere else. And of course, if you want to join me live on the call, you can just click over to unpluggedprep.com/live right below. And it's in the description of YouTube. It's on the link in my bio on Instagram. I'm happy to chat through any particulars of your situation. I see Eugene's asking here, would it be better to focus on drilling level 3 type questions timed and try to aim for a perfect score for those drills than trying to solve more harder level questions? So Eugene, I'd love a bit more context if you don't mind sharing. Tell me where you're scoring right now. What's your goal score, and when are you taking the test? And that can give you a more tailored recommendation to your particular situation. Now, in general, drilling level 3 questions timed, I'm not really sure how you would do that, to be frank, because to me, doing timed sections is not drilling, right? You're doing timed work in the context of a full section of 35 minutes. For logical reasoning, for example, you've got 25, 26 questions. But if you were drilling only level 3 questions, how would you know how long they should take, right? I mean, for me to take a bunch of random questions from different exams, put them in a set and say you should do them within this period of time would be an arbitrary and, in my view, invalid way to time oneself. Because should a level 3 question take 1.5 minutes? Should it take 2 minutes? If you're doing 20 of them, should they take in aggregate 30 or 40 minutes? I couldn't really say. So I would say we want you to do timed work when you're doing individual sections. So you're taking a previously administered prep test from Law Hub. You're pulling out one logical reasoning section and you're saying to yourself, I don't have time to do a full exam over the course of 2.5 hours in one sitting. So I'm going to do one individual section, say, during my lunch break. I'm going to do this one section, 35 minutes timed. I'll do questions 1 all the way up to 25 in one sitting, knowing that they get harder over the course of the section. And that means that within that 35 minutes, I'll try to solve the first 10 questions in roughly 10 or 12 minutes, build up a time bank that I can then apply to the tougher questions later in the section that truly need the time. And in my view, that's really the optimal way to study when you're not doing a full exam. And of course, foundational work like reading a textbook or watching course lesson videos is great and good to do. But at a certain point, once you're past the theory and you're in a place where you think you're ready to do harder questions, I would say you probably want to do more timed work because test day is not a drill and it's not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under test day conditions, which means considering pacing, time management, and endurance. And by the way, this is the sort of thing that we help students with in our coaching programs. And if you'd like my help and you want to talk through it in more depth, you could book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. And I'll be happy to talk you through this in more detail. And one thing we do for all our students is we create for you a personalized day-by-day study plan to carry you from now through your test date. And I see here a follow-up comment from Eugen. You're saying here, I'm aiming for 163 or be above, but now I'm getting 157 to 160. I registered for the October LSAT. It's my first time taking it. It seems I get 2 to 3 questions wrong in the level 3 because I end up rushing under timed conditions. I'm also taking 3 practice tests every week under timed conditions. Okay, so first off, 3 exams a week under timed conditions is a lot. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that many because you may not have enough time to adequately review them in depth. I'm curious, Eugene, are you working? Are you in school? Are you fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to be studying for the LSAT full time with no other obligations? How do you have the time to fit in 3 exams a week and also review them in sufficient depth? Now, if you're finding that you're rushing under timed conditions, it may be that you need to rush more specifically on the easier questions, like I said. Because if you're running into time constraints on the harder ones that truly need the extra time, it may be that you didn't go fast enough on the easier ones. And by the way, Alexa, thank you for your kind comments. I'm glad that you're finding the videos helpful. So I think that the easier questions, you want to go even faster on those. Don't second guess yourself. Trust your gut on them. They are as easy and as straightforward as they seem. And if you're already in the high 150s, 160 range, Eugene, then you're probably in a pretty good place where you have a decent foundation. I know that you want to score higher, of course, but you can probably afford to trust your gut on the easier ones. The first 10 or so are going to be mostly level 1 or level 2. And so you probably want to spend more of your time on level 3, 4, and 5, which you will do inevitably when you're doing individual timed sections because the harder questions by their very nature take more time. You also could, as a drill, this is not timed though, because again, drilling only happens in the context of a timed exam or timed section. You could do only the second half of a logical reasoning section where you take questions, say 15 through 25 or 15 to 26, basically till the end of the section, and you do only those questions. That way you will only be doing harder questions. You will get more exposure to questions you are more likely to get wrong. And that's really the point of all your prep beyond foundational work. Every LSAT question that you get wrong is an opportunity to learn something new. And if you were to only ever do easy questions where you only got them right, you would maybe boost your ego and you'd feel good about that. It's a great way to build morale to do only easy stuff. It's like I have a much younger brother, and when he turned 5, I was like 17 years old or something. And for his birthday, we went to play laser tag at his birthday party. And I did not hold back. I played laser tag with him. I just crushed all these 5-year-old kids. I was the top scorer. And I was proud of myself, but I shouldn't have been because that was not much of an accomplishment at all, right? Like beating a bunch of 5-year-olds at laser tag when you're 17 years old is to be taken as given. I probably should have just sat it out and ate pizza or something. But I like laser tag, so I wanted to play. But it was not an accomplishment, right? So similarly, if you're 160 or above and you're doing really easy questions, you're just wasting your time because you're going to win. But so what? It's not an accomplishment. It's like a Arnold Schwarzenegger lifting 1-pound weights. Like you're not even trying. So my recommendation here is, yes, do harder questions when you are a more capable LSAT student, but you should also be doing more timed work because your exam is only a couple of weeks away, Eugene, because you're taking it in October, right? So you've got, at this point, roughly 3 weeks. This is crunch time. This is the last moments. This is the calm before the storm. And so you should be only getting more full-length exams under your belt. And you mentioned that you're working part-time with regard to 3 exams a week. So maybe you have time to fit them in, but really, I mean, if you're working like 5-10 hours a week, then maybe you could squeeze in 3, but you might get more value out of doing only 2 exams a week and giving yourself more time for adequate review of those exams. We have a framework that we use at LSAT Unplugged called the Socratic Review Method. It's the cornerstone of our courses and our coaching programs. The idea being that you really want to, during your review process, get down to the root cause of what you're struggling with, what you're getting wrong and why. So you want to look at, for example, when you got a logical reasoning question wrong, was your mistake coming from the stimulus, meaning the argument? Was it the question stem, or was it the answer choices? Was it in the stimulus, for example, was it that the conclusion was buried in the middle? Was it that they failed to include indicator words like thus, therefore, so, and hence? Was it that they didn't include evidence indicator words like because or since? Was it that they used unfamiliar wording to refer to a common question type in the question stem? Or was it in the answer choices? Was it a tempting wrong answer or an unappealing right answer? Whatever the case may be, you want to drill down to the root cause of your mistakes so that you can nip them in the bud and you won't make the same mistake again. And by the way, if anyone wants to talk through their situation live, you can join me right now live at unpluggedprep.com/live, and we could have a real conversation. Otherwise, you could, of course, book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. And we could talk through the particulars of your situation in more depth. And by the way, anyone joining now, feel free to drop your questions in the chat or in the comments. Let me know where you're scoring right now, your current LSAT score, your goal LSAT score for test today, and when you're planning on taking it. All that context is really helpful in allowing me to better tailor the advice and recommendations to your situation. Now, Alex, if you're still here, I'd love to learn a bit more about what you're facing in terms of getting the LSAT mindset down when you're taking it. If you're having any difficulties right now, I'm happy to talk you through those and walk through them live if you're game. Okay, Jamal saying, I scored 165 in June, but I really want a 175 in October. Timing is my biggest issue. Should I focus more on speed drills or accuracy review right now? So we're at 165 before, you're looking to go up 10 points from that for your test, which is only 3 weeks away. I'm curious where you're scoring right now, Jamal. Would you mind sharing a little more context in terms of how close you are to your goal? And then I could better advise you on what to do in these last moments. But as for your question here, timing is a function of understanding, right? I mean, you get faster at the LSAT by understanding it better on a deeper level. So my thought would be really at this point, not doing drills. Again, like I said earlier to Eugen, I think it was like, we want to focus on timed work in the context of individual sections and full length exams, because that's the game. It's all about getting the questions right in the context of a full exam, because test day is going to be a full exam. And with only a couple of weeks till your test, I wouldn't be drilling questions by type. I wouldn't be doing sprints of like 10 questions. I would just say, take a full section, carve out 35 minutes during your lunch break or before work or after work or during your commute if you're taking a train or something, and just knock out an individual section, focus on getting faster without losing accuracy. And then for any questions that you get wrong or have difficulty with, you review them using the Socratic review method I just talked through. And this is the sort of balance that we actually help students strike in our coaching programs. We help you figure out when to slow down and when to push the speed, because it's not the same for everybody, right? I mean, we look at what is the area where you're most likely to get stuck in the quicksand, and we help you avoid falling into that trap. We help you avoid being in that situation by looking at what are your least favorite question types, your most common pain points or points of struggle. And then we say to you, Jamal, like, hey, like, this is where you're likely to run into an issue. Let's just flag that one, skip it, and come back to it later. For me personally, I'll typically flag 3 or 4 questions in a single logical reasoning section. That'll be in that tough band around 15 through 22 or 15 through 23. That's where they tend to be the hardest, like the level 4 and level 5 questions. For me, I'm typically prone to disliking parallel reasoning questions in that band, really technical sciencey questions. I'm a humanities person by background. I majored in political science, so natural science, not my thing. And then anything really abstract wording like philosophy or aestheticism or morality, where it feels like a philosophy text. Those are the questions where I'm personally prone to getting bogged down. And so I know this is my area of dislike. And so I flag those, I skip them, I finish the section, and then I come back later. And I aim to move at a fast enough pace that I can complete a logical reasoning section with 3 minutes to spare. So I'm doing it in 32 minutes rather than 35 minutes. And then with those 3 additional minutes, I go back and give a second look, a new attempt at any questions I flagged and skipped earlier. And so, Jamal, if you were to book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start, we could talk through this and figure out what are your particular weak areas, pain points, areas of struggle. And then we'd craft an action plan for you around that. The link's in my bio on Instagram. It's below the video on YouTube. And we could craft a study plan for you as well. But since you're taking in October, your focus should probably just be full-length exams and review because your exam's only a few weeks away. For someone on a longer time frame, I would say let's build a strong foundation, give you some targeted work to address your weak areas, and then we would shore those up and then transition to full exams if you were taking it in, say, January or February. Now, I've got a comment from Alexia here. I hope I'm saying your name correctly, by the way. You're saying, I took my first timed practice exam with zero knowledge of what the exam was even going to be asking. I skipped any drills and went straight into a timed practice. I scored embarrassingly low, 135. Now, I've actually watched some of your videos and podcasts. I'm yet to take another practice exam, but have definitely improved as far as having strategy and knowing question types. So kudos to you for the improvement that you've made. We all start somewhere. We all start from zero with no prior knowledge. We all come out of the womb without any knowledge of what the LSAT is or what exams are, or what even language is, right? So it's fine to start low. I mean, taking a cold diagnostic is an accomplishment in itself, but I never want you to place too much attention or stock in the result of that, because it just tells you that you haven't yet learned the language of the LSAT, but you can with time, right? I mean, if you give yourself adequate time to improve, then really anything's possible. I mean, we see students improve their scores by 20, 25, 30 points and more. Not saying that happens for every single person. I mean, most students do nothing, to be frank, and their scores stay low. So we just got to give you a proper plan of attack and give you the support structure to maximize the improvement that you can achieve. And I mean, I can't make a promise or a guarantee about how much you'll improve from that 135. I mean, you might get to 165, you might get to 175, or you might just get to 160, and that might be enough for you. I mean, what are your ultimate goals, Alexi? I mean, what kind of law schools do you want to go to? I mean, having the end in mind, starting there is really the best way we can work backwards to craft a plan of attack for you. And yeah, by the way, I wouldn't take another practice exam yet if you haven't yet done a serious amount of studying, right? I mean, you said you've improved somewhat, like you've learned strategies, you've learned question types. What I would recommend is that, we run you through the basics of the LSAT, right? You've got 15 or so different types of logical reasoning questions: strengthen, weaken, flaw, necessary assumption, sufficient assumption, and so on. We've got reading comprehension. And then after that, we work on timing and pacing to work on how you allocate your time over the course of the section. Then we pull it all together with full-length timed practice tests. And so if you would like my help and we could get you started with a plan of attack, you could book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. And we could take the first step together. We'll go over a conclusion question together. I'll give you kind of lay of the land in terms of how we could I'll give you the lay of the land in terms of how we could craft a study plan for you around whatever your target LSAT test date might be. But the first step, we would just work through that conclusion question together to give you a sense of what it's like to go through a question live with someone on the other end, because on test day, you're going to have that proctor there with you on test day. If you're taking it remotely, they're going to be watching you through your webcam, like all of you are watching me right now. And the only way that you get over the anxiety of talking through something live is just doing it, right? I mean, I've been teaching the LSAT for 20 years. I only started making YouTube videos like this about 7 years ago. And You're like, well, Steve, what were you doing the other 13 years from 2005 till 2018? And the thing was, I mean, I was teaching LSAT students one-on-one. I was teaching live group classes in person, but believe it or not, I was nervous to be on camera and talk to folks like I'm talking to you all right now. And I thought to myself at one point, like, this is really silly. I've got to get over this or I won't respect myself. And so I just jumped in with a live stream, actually, believe it or not. I didn't even make a video that I could just delete and have nobody ever see. If you go to my YouTube channel and you click the live tab there, you'll see my oldest live streams from the end of August 2018, nearly 7 years ago. And I just jumped in and I found out that I loved it. And when I jump on calls with students for the free LSAT tutoring lesson, I walk them through a conclusion question. And a lot of them are like, it's a little nerve wracking to do this with you, Steve, on the other end. And I'm like, well, get used to it because on test day, the proctor is going to be there too. And we've got to inoculate you against the fear around talking through an LSAT question or working through an LSAT question with somebody on the other end. And the way that you get better at it is you just by doing it again and again and again. So if you could get to a point where you've done 10, 15, 20, 30 exams under real world test day conditions with the timing, the pacing, the endurance, and maybe with a study buddy on the other end where the two of you jump on a Zoom call or a Google Meet together and you just leave the live stream open to each other for 2.5 hours working through it, where you know at any moment that the other person might be looking at you. It'll be a way for you to help yourself get over that fear or anxiety around the stakes of someone being on the other end. Because I mean that sympathetic nervous, I think that's the right biology there term. Someone correct me, please. But it's the nervous system response to the anxiety will get your heart pumping, your adrenaline going. Maybe you'll get a little bit sweaty pits or whatever, just because it's real, right? But if you do that enough times, then your nervous system reaction won't be as severe. It'll become more and more moderated and muted over time. I mean, if you look at my YouTube videos over the past 7 years, a lot of them are webinars. There were points where I was doing 3-4 webinars a day. And each one was a little bit nerve-wracking, but I just did it enough where I got to a place where I was no longer scared to do it because I felt like I'd done it enough that I knew nothing could really go wrong, that no one's going to ask me a question that's likely going to stump me. And by the way, just for fun, folks, I mean, I get a lot of the same questions over and over, and whatever your questions are, I'm happy to address them. But if you want, just for fun, like ask me a question that you don't think I've gotten before. Like ask me something where Steve won't know how to answer this question, and I'll do my best to give it a shot. Because I feel like the way you get past anxiety, and I'm saying this for myself, but also for all of you who are going to be taking the LSAT for real at some point, the way you get past the anxiety of doing something difficult or scary is just by doing it multiple times. You're desensitizing yourself to the fear. Just like if you have a phobia of spiders, for example, arachnophobia, or a fear of confined spaces like claustrophobia, what you do ideally to reduce the fear is to expose yourself to it gradually more and more over time. And so for me, that would be doing, say, a live stream with one person on the other end, then do one with 2 people on the other end. And eventually every single day, we just add one person to the audience. And over time, you have then 100 people 100 days later, or you have 500 people 500 days later. But because you've done it gradually, there's no one trigger or activation point where it's like, this is radically different from what I've seen before. And so if you wanted to build up to doing a full exam with someone on the other end, you would just say, I'm going to have a study buddy do one single LSAT question with me live. And I'm not going to know the answer, but I'm going to try and attempt it with that person on the other end. And so that could be, for your starting point, you book the free call with me at unpluggedprep.com/start, link in bio on Instagram, a link in the description on YouTube, and I will work through with you one single logical reasoning question, specifically a conclusion question together, because that's the backbone of logical reasoning. It's the foundation. You got to be able to do conclusion to do anything else. So we start there, and I will work through that question with you live, and you will get over the fear of doing a single LSAT question with somebody on the other end. And then we could set you up with ongoing LSAT tutoring, where you'll work through additional questions live with your tutor. Every single week, we'll go through a few questions with them live. And then on test day, when you have the proctor on the other end, you will be at a place where you're able to do 100 LSAT questions in one sitting. You won't be fatigued at the end because you'll have done several full sittings already. And you won't be scared of the proctor because you'll have done questions with someone else on the other end of the webcam. And then it'll be a lot more smooth. I mean, the average student typically drops 5 to 8 points from their practice test to the actual exam. And so if you want a 165, for example, on test day, I saw Alexia, you said you're aiming for a 160 score, right? So let's say you want 165 on test day. We want your practice test average going in to be at least a 170 so that you've got a buffer in case you have a bad proctor or a tech issue or nerves and anxiety are likely to get the better of you. We want to have that buffer so that your worst case scenario is a 165, and hopefully, assuming everything goes smoothly, you do even better. Now, Alexia, you said you're taking the test in November, right? You're going to book a call with me. Fantastic. I'm looking forward to connecting with you. You said that you're a 3.8 GPA type of student. Cool. Awesome. Does that mean that you actually have a 3.8 GPA, by the way? Like, is that your actual on record transcript undergraduate GPA? Because if so, that's awesome. I mean, the T14 law schools, meaning the top 14 law schools in the country, the most elite, like your Harvard, Yale, Stanford, essentially the Ivy League of law schools, they have GPA medians of 3.8, 3.9. So you're saying, yes, that is your actual GPA. Awesome. Fantastic. I always like just like to confirm there. And so if we match that 3.8 GPA with a 170, then you've got a decent shot at getting into a lot of top tier law schools. And if you got a 175, you would have a great shot at the T14. Now, based on your target, of course, you may not need an LSAT score quite that high. A 160s score might be enough for you. And you've got roughly 6-7 weeks till your test. And so I would be curious, Alexia, if let's say you mentioned you were at 135 starting, you've done work since then. Before we meet, assuming that we're not meeting today, take a practice test if you can, or just give me a general sense of what your improvement's been like since then, because I'm curious to know where you're at today relative to where you want to be in 6 or 7 weeks or so. And then we could craft an action plan to help get you there. And you said you were taking October initially, pushing back to November. You said, I got too nervous and want to give myself a stronger foundation before I take another time to exam again. Okay, I mean, that's totally fine. I hear you on that. But we also want to get enough exams under your belt, right? So can we make an agreement, Alexia, that you're going to take another practice test within the next 7 days? Like at least within the next week, you will take another exam because we want to give you more at-bats, more exposures. So that test day itself will be like just another run through and you've done it all before and you've seen it all before. So could we get like a yes or thumbs up on that plan? And then we'll talk through the details when we connect today or tomorrow for that free LSAT tutoring lesson. Awesome. Agreed. Fantastic. Thanks for that. Okay. So Jacob is asking here, what about a GPA of 3.5 and an LSAT score of 175 and up? What do law school and scholarship prospects look like then? So I'm going to give you the really annoying lawyerly-like answer. It depends. It depends on which schools we're talking about, right? So for some schools, their GPA median is a 3.5, in which case you're already at meeting their GPA median, you're probably above their LSAT median. For other schools like the T14, their GPA medians are 3.8, 3.9, and their LSAT medians are 170 to 174. And so you'd be below on the GPA median, but you would be above on the LSAT median. Now, I'm guessing, is your GPA from undergrad pretty fixed at this point, but your LSAT is to be determined? That's usually the case for folks because, of course, if you're in the LSAT world and you're watching my videos and live streams, then you're probably already studying for the LSAT and you've already been through most, if not all, of undergrad. And so if your GPA is pretty fixed in stone at this point, it is okay, cool. So we're good on that. That's set. We can't really impact that much. It is what it is, but we have significant room to improve you on the LSAT front. Now, Jacob, when are you planning on taking the LSAT? How much time do we have? In other words, are we taking it in 3 weeks for October, taking it in a month and a half for November, or do we have even more time? Because we want to look at basically where you are now score-wise, if you've taken a practice test or diagnostic recently, and then we want to compare that to where do you want to be. If you do want to aim for 175, you said that you're taking in November, also open to January. My next question is, how much time do you have in terms of hours per week? Could you put in 10 hours a week, 15, 20 a week? How much time do we have available for you to study between now and your test? Because then we can craft a study plan around that as well. And when people ask me, like, can you tell me my chances of getting into this school or that school? It all depends on your LSAT score, right? So we got to know what score are you going to have on record today, and what are we going to get you? You have 15 hours a week, so that's enough time to do 2 exams a week. Each exam takes you 2.5 hours. That's 5 hours out of 15. The other 10 hours are devoted to review, drilling weak areas, and maybe consuming some LSAT lesson material addressing your weak areas. And if you want me to help you figure out what your weak areas are and help you craft an action plan around those, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. We could talk through the details, Jacob. I'd love to meet with you personally and talk through it in more depth. But do you have a certain goal score or a target school that you're looking at? Because I mean, there are schools that are targets where your numbers are going to be enough to get you in. Then there are schools where they are reaches and your numbers will not only get you in, but also likely get you significant scholarship money, maybe even a full ride. Then there are your reaches where you'd be lucky to get in and it'd be against the odds, but you might as well just shoot your shot. And the way that we maximize your outcomes in terms of both getting in and getting you scholarship money is by getting you the highest LSAT score possible. And so ultimately the answer is always the same, which is whatever your goals, whatever you want to achieve, it all comes down to, at this point today, getting you the highest LSAT score possible. Ideally, we will get you a score above the medians of the schools to which you're applying, which will then not only get you in, but also get you scholarship money, maybe even save you $200,000 or more on your tuition. And so, unfortunately, Jacob, due to grade inflation, a lot of good law schools have GPA medians above a 3.5 because a lot of majors, I'm not naming names here, but they fall within the humanities, they give you easy A's. And it's a lot easier to get an A in English or sociology than to get an A in engineering. And I know that because I took some of those humanities classes and I got easy A's from professors who didn't even believe in grades. And so they just gave everybody an A, which was really helpful for my transcript, of course, not so much for learning necessarily. And as a side note, I was interested in, say, economics. And so I actually took an intro level economics class in college because I was curious about it. And it tanked my GPA. I think I got a B. And it was because there was a curve in the class and a lot of my competition had taken economics in high school. And so they already knew the entire curriculum and they were just redoing the class for an easy A. And so my GPA suffered and I was punished for my intellectual curiosity. And so lesson learned, only take easy A classes. And I hate saying that because you're paying all this money in your undergrad tuition and you ideally want to learn something new. But if your sole agenda or goal or desire is to maximize your odds of law school admission, the most prudent practical course of action would be to just take classes where you get easy A's. And your competition has already done that. And if you haven't, it's unfortunate, but we are where we are. And all we can do at this point going forward is maximize your odds by getting you the highest LSAT score possible. And that is how people get 4.1, 4.2 GPAs, Alexia. They're just getting easy A classes. So what you should probably do is focus on your LSAT prep. Don't redo classes from undergrad. Don't get a second BA, which some people tell me sometimes they want to do. And by the way, your master's degree GPA does not count for undergrad. And so what you should do is aim for that 175, 180. And to your question, you're asking, once you crack 175, do T14s start to look past the GPA of, say, 3.5? I mean, I'm not going to say that they're going to look past the GPA, but it will mitigate the downsides or negative impact of having a GPA below the median. Like, it's a balancing act, right? And so if your GPA is below the median, you counteract it by having a relatively higher LSAT score. If your GPA is really high, and then you can get a higher LSAT score as well, then you're in an even better position. But it's kind of like if you want to go out on the dating market and you're not good looking, but you're funny, being funny counteracts you not being that good looking. It balances it out. Ideally, you're both funny and good looking, but if you're lacking one, you at least want to have the other to raise your numbers, essentially, right? It's the same thing here. I hope that wasn't off color. But my point here basically is that we want to give you the strongest possible candidacy. And the way that we do that is by getting you the highest possible LSAT, because that is what you can most likely improve by that point where you're at today. And so you've got a month and a half till November. You've got roughly 3.5 months till January. what I'd want to do with you, Jacob, is craft an action plan to get you that 175 from wherever you are today. And so if you haven't yet already, please book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. For you, Jacob, and for anyone else watching this, I'm happy to help you out however I can. And folks, this was a blast. Thank you for joining me today. And I'll look forward to seeing you all soon. Again, unpluggedprep.com/start to connect with me live, personally, one-on-one. Happy to help.